I woke up in a hospital bed. The world a blur of antiseptic white and beeping machines. With no idea who I was. A man in a tailored suit stood at my bedside. His emerald eyes locked on me like I was the only thing tethering him to the earth. "Elliot," he whispered, voice cracking. "You're awake, thank God." And I flinched. Because to me, he was a stranger who looked like he'd burn the world down for me. "My name," he said, was Elliot Kane, a 24-year-old barista from Portland, Oregon, who'd been in a car accident that stole my memories like a thief in the night. The man, introducing himself as Julian Voss, claimed to be my fiancé, heir to a media empire and a modern-day prince in America's elite circles. His presence was overwhelming 6 feet of quiet intensity, with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass and a tenderness that didn't match the tabloid photos of him I'd later find online. All cold smiles and ruthless charm. "You don't remember me," he said. Not a question. And the pain in his voice made my chest ache for reasons I couldn't explain. The doctors warned that my amnesia might be permanent. A fact that hit Julian harder than me. I didn't know what I'd lost, but he looked like he'd lost everything. Over the next week, he visited daily, bringing coffee I didn't recognize as my favorite and telling stories of our life together late night drives along the coast. Stolen kisses in dive bars. Promises made under starlit skies. I wanted to believe him, but something felt off, like a puzzle piece forced into the wrong slot. My gut screamed that Julian wasn't telling me everything, and when I caught him staring at me with guilt flickering in his eyes, I knew there was a secret he wasn't ready to share. Discharged from the hospital, I moved into Julian's penthouse in downtown Portland. A sleek cage of glass and steel that felt more like a museum than a home. He was attentive, almost obsessively so, cooking me breakfast, leaving notes on my pillow, and watching me like I might vanish. But the more he tried to rebuild our past, the more I pushed back. I didn't know this Elliot he loved, and I wasn't sure I wanted to. One night, over a dinner he'd spent hours preparing, I snapped. "Stop acting like you're my savior," I said, voice shaking. "You're hovering like a homewrecker who stole someone else's life." His fork froze midair, and the silence that followed was deafening. I expected anger, but instead, his face crumpled, and he whispered, "You don't know how close that is to the truth." That night, I found a locked box under the bed, its edges worn and scratched. Inside were photos of us Julian laughing, me with a scar on my cheek I didn't remember earning, our arms around each other in places I didn't recognize. There were letters, too, in my handwriting, addressed to Julian, filled with love and promises I couldn't imagine writing. But one letter, crumpled and tear-stained, stopped me cold. "If you ever loved me, Julian, let me go? You can't keep me as your secret." My heart pounded. What had he done? And why did my body still hum with warmth when he was near, despite the betrayal I sensed? I confronted him the next morning, holding the letter like a weapon. "What is this?" I demanded. Julian's face paled, and for the first time, he looked scared. "Elliot, it's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Then tell me the truth." He sank onto the couch, head in his hands. "You weren't just my fiancé," he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "You were my everything, and I ruined it." He told me we'd met 2 years ago at a charity gala, where I'd been a server, not a barista, and he'd been instantly smitten. But his family, the Voss dynasty, had forbidden our relationship. calling me a nobody who'd tarnished their legacy. Julian had fought for us, but I'd walked away, unwilling to be his hidden shame. The accident, he swore, was a freak coincidence, not his doing. But when I'd woken up with no memories, he'd seen a chance to start over, to love me openly without the weight of our past. I was selfish, he admitted, tears streaking his face. I thought I could make you love me again. I wanted to hate him, but the way my heart raced when he looked at me told a different story. I was falling for him, or maybe I'd never stopped, and that terrified me more than the truth. Days turned into weeks, and I began piecing together who I'd been. I visited the cafe where I'd supposedly worked, only to find no one knew me. I tracked down old friends, but their stories didn't align with Julian's. The more I dug, the more I realized our love had been a battlefield, fought in secret against his family's disapproval and my own pride. Yet every night, when Julian tucked a blanket around me or hummed a song I inexplicably knew the words to, I felt the ghost of our past pulling me closer. One evening, under a sky bruised with rain, I found him on the balcony, staring at the city below. I don't know if I can trust you, I said, voice breaking. He turned, eyes raw with hope and fear. Then let me earn it, he said. I'll wait as long as it takes. In that moment, I saw not the prince of a media empire, but a man who'd lost everything and still chose me. I stepped closer, our breaths mingling in the cold air. And for the first time, I let myself want him, not the idea of us, but him, flaws and all. The rain began to fall, a soft curtain between us and the world. As I stood inches from Julian on that balcony, his hand hovered near mine, hesitant, like he was afraid I'd vanish if he touched me. I didn't move away, and that small act of staying felt like the bravest thing I'd done since waking up in that hospital bed. Over the next few weeks, I demanded answers, not just from Julian, but from the fragments of my past. I found an old phone in the locked box. Its screen cracked, but still functional. It held texts, photos, and voice memo snippets of a life I didn't remember but couldn't deny. One memo was me, laughing, saying, "Julian, you're ridiculous. Proposing in a diner at 2 a.m. His voice followed, low and earnest. I'd propose anywhere. Elliot, as long as it's you. My throat tightened. How could I have forgotten a love that sounded so real? But the deeper I dug, the darker the truth became. Julian's family wasn't just disapproving, they were ruthless. His mother, Eleanor Voss, a media titan with a smile like a blade, had orchestrated a campaign to erase me from his life. I found emails on the phone, sent from an anonymous account, warning me to stay away from Julian or face consequences. One chilling message read, "You're a distraction he can't afford. Leave, or we'll make you." My accident, Julian insisted, was unrelated. But doubt not at me. Had someone wanted me gone? I confronted Julian again, this time in a quiet park near the river, the air thick with the scent of wet grass. "Did your family do this to me?" I asked, holding up the phone. His face darkened, not with guilt, but with fury. "They tried to control us," he said. "But I swear, Elliot, I'd never let them hurt you." He told me how he'd defied his mother, refusing to marry the heiress she'd chosen to secure a merger. Instead, he'd chosen me, a nobody with a sharp tongue and a heart too stubborn to break. But the pressure had worn me down, and I'd left him, unable to live as his secret. The revelation shifted something in me. I wasn't just a victim of amnesia. I was a fighter who'd walked away from love to protect myself. Yet here I was, drawn back to Julian like a moth to flame. We started spending more time together, not as the perfect couple he'd painted, but as two people rediscovering each other. He took me to the diner from the voice memo, a greasy spoon with flickering neon signs. "You love their milkshakes," he said, sliding one across the table. I took a sip, and the taste sweet, creamy. Familiar unlocked a flicker of memory, his laugh. My hand in his. The world fading away. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw not the stranger I'd woken up to, but the man I'd loved. But the past wasn't done with us. One night, a sleek black car followed us home from the diner. Julian's grip on my hand tightened, his eyes scanning the street. "Stay close," he whispered. Days later, I received an anonymous note slipped under the penthouse door. "You should have stayed gone." Panic clawed at me, but Julian was a storm of resolve. He hired security, moved us to a safe house in the Oregon countryside, and promised to uncover who was behind the threats. "I lost you once," he said, his voice fierce. "I won't let it happen again." The safe house, a cabin nestled in pine trees, became our sanctuary. Away from the city's noise, we talked for hours about my dreams of opening a bookstore, his fear of becoming his mother, our shared love for old jazz records. One night, as rain battered the roof, he played a vinyl of Ella Fitzgerald, and we danced, slow and clumsy, in the dim light. His hands on my waist felt like home, and when he kissed me, soft and tentative, it was like remembering something I'd never forgotten. "I'm scared," I admitted, my forehead against his. "I don't know who I am without you." He smiled, sad and sure. "You're Elliot Kane, and you're enough." But the threats didn't stop. A brick shattered the cabin's window one night. A note tied to it, "He's not yours." Julian's face hardened, and he called his sister, Lila, the only family member who'd supported us. She arrived the next day, her sharp eyes scanning the cabin like a detective. "Mother's behind this," she said bluntly. "She's obsessed with control." Lila revealed that Eleanor had hired private investigators to track me before the accident, hoping to scare me off. The car crash might have been an accident, but the threats now, they were deliberate. I felt like I was drowning in a life I didn't choose. Julian, sensing my fear, took my hands. "We can run," he said. "Anywhere you want, Europe, South America, anywhere." But running meant giving up the truth, and I wasn't ready to let go of who I'd been or who we could be. "No," I said, voice steady. "We fight." The decision to fight changed everything. Julian and I, with Lila's help, began unraveling the web his family had spun. We met in secret with a journalist, a friend of Lila's, who'd been digging into the Voss Empire's darker dealings. Over coffee in a nondescript diner, she showed us documents proof that Eleanor had paid off investigators to intimidate me before the accident. The crash itself was still a mystery, but the threats were her doing, a desperate attempt to keep Julian under her thumb. "She'll stop at nothing," the journalist warned. "Be careful." Careful wasn't enough. 2 days later, as we drove back to the safe house, a car rammed into us, sending us skidding off the road. My heart pounded as Julian pulled me from the wreckage. his hands shaking but steady. "I've got you," he said, and in that moment, I believed him. We hid in the woods, the cold biting at our skin, until Lila found us. "We need to end this," she said, her voice steel. She had a plan: confront Eleanor publicly, at the Voss charity gala, where the world would see her for what she was. The gala was a glittering affair, held in a Portland ballroom dripping with chandeliers and pretense. Julian and I entered hand in hand, my scar stark under the lights, his defiance louder than any speech. Eleanor's smile faltered when she saw us, but she recovered quickly, playing the gracious matriarch. I felt the weight of every stare, but Julian's grip anchored me. Lila took the stage, her voice cutting through the murmurs. "This family has secrets," she began, and the room went silent. She exposed Eleanor's schemes, the threats, the investigators, the attempts to erase me. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the journalist's evidence flashed on a screen behind her. Eleanor's face twisted with rage. But before she could speak, Julian stepped forward. "I love him," he said, his voice clear and unshakable, looking at me. "And I'll choose him every time." The words hit me like a tidal wave, and I remembered flashes of us laughing, fighting, loving, a life I'd thought was lost. I grabbed his hand, tears in my eyes, and said, "I'm choosing you too." The crowd erupted, some in shock, others in applause, and Eleanor stormed out, her empire crumbling under the weight of truth. We didn't win that night, not completely. Eleanor's influence lingered, and the threats didn't vanish overnight. But we were free in a way we'd never been. We moved to a small coastal town, far from the city's chaos, and opened the bookstore I dreamed of. Julian traded his suits for sweaters, learning to make coffee as bad as mine. We rebuilt, not just our love, but ourselves, piece by piece. One evening, as we sat on the beach, waves crashing under a pink sky, Julian pulled out a ring, the same one from the diner. He said, "You don't have to remember," he murmured, "but will you stay?" I laughed, tears falling, and slipped the ring on. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. And as he kissed me, the world felt whole. Not because I remembered everything, but because we'd chosen each other, scars and all. Our story wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Love, I learned, wasn't about remembering every moment. It was about building new ones, fighting for them, and never letting go. We were two men who'd faced a world that tried to tear us apart, and we'd won, not by erasing the past, but by writing a future together.